Welcome to Policing TV and IPA Insight. This is an interview conducted by myself, Maj-Britt Rinaldo Ronnebro, on behalf of the hashtag She's IPA. Well, I believe that my listeners and watchers remember that IPA is abbreviation for International Police Association. Today, I am happy to welcome Andrea Shoetan, I think that would be, or she needs to correct my way of pronouncing her surname. She's the interim president of the Disabled Police Association, and this role she carries on top of her daily business as police officer. She got the rank of police inspector in Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary. I also looked at her bio and I could see that on top of her daily job as Airway Police Liaison Officer, she got this president position to carry out. She is currently on the secondment to the National Police Chief Council, and we will talk about all these different things. So, with this short presentation about Andrea, I would like to ask you, Andrea, why did you become a police officer, and how was the reaction from your family, your friends, and later on your colleagues when you came to your first police station?
Thank you, and thank you, Maj-Britt, for inviting me for the interview. I'm really looking forward to doing this and connecting with the International Police Association. So, my story about policing, it isn't something I thought of as a child. It wasn't something that I aspired to do throughout my whole kind of childhood years. I actually went to university and became a scientist. I studied forensic and biomedical science at university, got my degree, and went into the type of work that I should have done with my degree. So I worked for the Forensic Science Service as a DNA analyst, and then after that I was an environmental scientist as well. But at one point I sat there and thought, I'm just not getting the satisfaction here. You know, I'm analysing crime scene samples from all around the UK, and I don't know what happens with them. I do all the work to get, as we know, like the ladder profile that you see, the DNA profile, it gets put onto the National DNA database, but I do the scientific part of that and the DNA extraction, and then it's sent on to someone else. So I don't even know if someone's identified as a suspect, what happens with that case. And I thought, I don't see myself doing this for the rest of my life, sitting in a lab with a white coat on and a mop cap and a face mask before COVID. I had to wear that every day for my work, for DNA cross-contamination, of course. And I thought, how did I get interested in science in the first place? Because I knew very early on I loved forensic science. And it was crime, it was books, it was reading, like from the early days, like Nancy Drew, things like that, and then watching Murder, She Wrote on the TV. And I went to a careers fair at university, and it was from Cambridgeshire Constabulary, which was my local police force where I went to university. And what she said stuck in my head without me realising it. She said, "Oh, your interest is in sort of scenes of crime, work, forensics, but you might find you prefer to be the police officer because you're the first person on the scene. You're the person who has to prevent something happening. You have to collect the evidence. You have to preserve it. And the scenes of crime people come in almost slow time afterwards." And I thought, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm supposed to take a different direction here. So I believe in fate. And I was actually really happy in the job I was in. It was really going in the right direction. It was really challenging me as a graduate. And I thought, right, either I get in first time, which is really difficult in policing. It's a very difficult recruitment process. And if I don't get in, I'll stay where I am in my scientific role. Long story short, I got in first time. I did apply to Cambridgeshire initially. And then I decided, actually, I need to be a little bit closer to friends and family and my boyfriend, now husband at the time. So I transferred partway through my recruitment process to Hampshire. So that's how I got there. And my family were really supportive. Overall, everybody was really supportive. They weren't surprised. I was the one that was surprised, I think, about my career direction, not them. They obviously saw something in me. And now I understand why. I love helping people. That's throughout my whole life is looking after other people. So it makes a lot more sense to me now than it did for the first 10 years of my career. I only had one friend that was negative about it. And I have found that it kind of depends on people's interactions with the police. If they've had an experience of someone they know has been arrested, they don't necessarily like the police. But overall, really, really positive.
Yeah. Lovely. And the reaction when you came to your first police station in Cambridgeshire?
Yes. That was interesting. As we are, talking about females in policing, I sent to a response station in the north of Hampshire. Never even heard of it before, called Yateley, really small place. Had to find somewhere to live. Didn't really know, where I was going. Turned up on my shift, very small response shift covering quite a rural area with one sort of middle-sized town, 6 police officers with 1 sergeant, all male, the only female. And the first questions I got asked is, are you single? Have you got a boyfriend? But would you cheat on him? And things like that. So it did kind of surprise me a little bit. I thought it was going to be a really social job because I didn't know anybody, because I'd had to move from Cambridgeshire down to the north of Hampshire. I didn't know anybody, and I thought we're going to be going out and it'll be really sociable, but it actually wasn't like that. It wasn't quite as I expected it to be. And I remember my first sergeant said to me, I was a bit worried about you when you started, female probationer. I was 24 years old, all male shift, very different ages as well on that shift, more towards the sort of middle age bracket, so nobody in their 20s and only a couple of people in their 30s. And I just adapted to it. I thought, I either sink or swim here. I've got to change how I am to kind of adapt to the guys on my team, and they were really supportive of me, and I really enjoyed those first few years at Yateley.
Yeah, lovely. And then you worked on. So what kind of areas has been your interest, and what did you do any specialities or training during these years until today?
So to begin with, I did a couple of specialisms that you were able to do at that time on response. I became what's called an area car driver, which is the highest level of response driving you can do outside the traffic department. So that's something I had to do. We call it in the policing a board. It's basically an interview. I had to do an interview for that. And I remember the first one I did, I completely failed because I'd never done a policing interview. And I got my feedback and they said, you can't use civilian interview techniques in policing. You've got to change all that. You've got to listen to what I'm saying. And it's all about me. I did this and I did that. And I was like, right, okay. And it felt really uncomfortable. But I took the feedback and I did the next board. And then I came top of the second board after failing the first one. So I learned a lot from that failure. And I really loved it. I got to drive, the really high performance cars, the BMWs and the Volvos. And you got sent to the best incidents, if you like. You got sent to the grade 1s, and you were seen as the experienced officer, almost like a senior constable on the shift. I really enjoyed that. And also I was what was called at the time a SOIT, a sexual offences interview trained officer. So I did a specialism to deal with victims of rape and serious sexual offence. So when those incidents were reported, I would go and visit the victim, and I would take them to they're dedicated, they're called SARCs, sexual assault referral centres, is the abbreviation, where it's a brilliant sort of one-stop shop where you have specialists that are there, a doctor, you can do the medical examination, you can do the interview, and it feels just like a lounge with a sofa, and, doesn't look like a police station, doesn't look like anything at all, and I'm there purely for the victim to look after them. So I did those two things. I stayed on response, had my first baby, went on maternity leave, came back, and I was the first person in my area to work with my shift, but just work sort of reduced hours, but still following the shift pattern. A lot of people have done, like, they work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, say, but then they have to work alongside other shifts. But I stayed with my C shift as it was, but I had to move station because my station was closed for response officers. They moved me to somewhere called Farnborough, which is across from Yateley. So brand new shift I didn't know, brand new sergeant I didn't know, come back from maternity leave thinking, do I know what I'm doing anymore? Do I have a brain anymore? Can I remember this? That was really tough. And I'd got my sergeant's exam a couple of years before, I think. And I thought, and I'd already been signed up as, ready to do acting sergeant duties. But then I got pregnant. So I kind of went there and said, look, I'm really interested in promotion. I understand you don't know me, but this is where I was in my old station. And actually, I wasn't particularly sort of supported by that sergeant at the time. It was a female inspector that said to me, right, Andrea, I get it. I've seen your PDR, yearly appraisal, as we call it, PDR. And it said on there, yes, she's ready. she said, as soon as you're ready and you found your feet again after coming back from maternity leave, let me know and I will support you with that. But without her support as a female role model, I don't think that would have happened at that point, because they already had a plan with a male on the shift who was less experienced than me, didn't have the sergeant's exam, and it was clear that I was, who are you? You're brand new. I don't even know you. So that's really, really important. So I did that. I moved again. I had another baby at one point, moved to Aldershot. I did temporary sergeant duties as a neighbourhood sergeant back in Yateley. And then I went as a PC when my temporary promotion ended, back to Farnborough on neighbourhoods. And then after maternity leave with my second son, got 2 boys, I joined the youth offending team. And that was a career choice, partly because I'm a mum. I was getting quite tired, with shift work, night shifts and juggling 2 children. And childcare in the UK doesn't necessarily fit in with shift working, as I'm sure it doesn't necessarily worldwide. And I really enjoyed the youth offending team, really, really different aspects. You're a police officer in a civilian team of children's services, so social workers, and it's all about trying to lead that young person away from a life in crime, getting in there early and giving them interventions, help and support to try to steer them in the right direction. And I really, really enjoyed that. And it was at that point I then got promoted to sergeant in 2018 from that role. And I went back to response in Basingstoke, full-time, 24/7 shift work with 2 young children still, as a sergeant, as my first posting.
Wow. Yeah. You've done really interesting things and also different things in policing. And I normally tell to my police officers that never stay too long at the same position, because that will not make you to be developed. And I think you somehow found this by yourself, and also with this support that you had, so you could become the police sergeants. But today you are an inspector, isn't that correct? Yes. But something else happened in your life that you shared with me. That is how we want to be connected. You start to lose your hearing, and this hearing loss started obviously 2013. Just very briefly, what happened to you, Andrea?
Okay, so there's sort of 2 elements to my hearing story. The first element I should probably mention is, so when I did my initial recruitment medical screening to join the police, I realised I had a low-level hearing issue in my right ear, which is more the classic hearing loss you get with age-related hearing loss, so high frequencies. Didn't particularly cause me any issues, didn't realise that I had any hearing loss, didn't realise I suffered from tinnitus, which is like the constant sounds in your ear. And when I saw an audiologist, he said, do you have tinnitus? And I said, what's that? And he said, well, do you hear noises in your ear, like beeping and aeroplanes, unpleasant noises? I said, yeah, they're there all the time. And I thought everybody had that, because I'd had it probably since a teenager. I couldn't pinpoint what age. He said, no, that's tinnitus. Not everyone does have that. I said, oh, okay. So completely unaware that I had that. And he said, it won't cause you any issue as long as you protect your hearing in your left ear. Otherwise, you'll really notice that you do have a loss in your right ear. He said, you won't be able to do firearms training, which I was never, but in the UK, obviously, we're one of the only police forces, well, the only police force in the world that police by consent. We don't all carry firearms. So I didn't really want to carry a gun. I was actually okay with that. So just ignored it, carried on. And then in 2013, I had a very sudden debilitating attack, which was classed as labyrinthitis at the time, attack of vertigo. So everything, the whole world was spinning. My body didn't know what was up or down. I was being very sick. And that took me away from work for about 6 weeks to recover from that. I couldn't walk properly. It took a long time for my kind of brain and my nerves to realign, if you like, with balance. Everyone knows your ears are responsible for balance. But until you have an attack like that, you don't really appreciate it. And then, long story short, it never really went away. So at this point, I was a PC in Aldershot on response. Again, 2 young children. And I thought, okay, this is going to go. And then when it didn't, I did what I cringe at. when other people do. I went onto Google, I Googled my symptoms and went to the doctors and said, I feel really embarrassed saying this. I think I might have a condition called Meniere's disease, because I've looked at this list of symptoms and I have like 99% of them. Which is, tinnitus in my left ear, which was so loud I didn't even hear it in my right ear anymore. Vertigo attacks, getting really dizzy, lack of balance. And then there's no test for Meniere's disease. You have to rule out other things. You have to have an MRI scan to check if there's any tumours there. So I had to have medication for vertigo migraines to check it was that. And then after a period of years, got the diagnosis in 2013. And I remember I was on maternity leave with my second child when I got the diagnosis. And I thought, oh, my lifesaver. I'm not going to be able to drive a car. They're going to take my driving licence away. They're going to sack me from my job because I won't be able to do it anymore. It was huge, really, really huge, and almost a grief for my health and a grief for my hearing loss. Wasn't that bad at that point, because basically with every vertigo attack, it damages the cells in your ear, so your hearing can drop. And that is what's happened to me in the long term as the years progressed. And I still managed to stay on response for all this time. I never had a vertigo attack frontline at all. They were always bizarrely on my rest days. People would say to me, oh, it's caused by stress. And that doesn't make any sense, does it? Because why am I not having it in these really stressful situations I'm dealing with? So it was really manageable once I overcame that first bout. And then things took a really bad turn when I was a sergeant in Basingstoke, and I had a really, really bad vertigo attack at work. And I was like, right, this is it. I can't do this. This is now dangerous, because it never happened to me at work before, not once. So it never affected technically my career at that point. But at this point I was wearing 2 hearing aids because my hearing had deteriorated so much. And I thought, this is just not something that's thought of, that anybody works frontline in an operational role as a police officer or police staff member and they have hearing loss. And I was literally told that, well, no one on the front line has hearing aids. I said, well, hello, yes, I do. And I was in my 30s at the time, let alone, we work later now in policing. We're expected to work to 60 now. It used to be a 30-year career in the UK. So I said, well, it's very normal to get hearing loss as you get older. And then you have people like me that have a medical condition, which is when I started work on hearing loss as well, and giving support in my home force, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary, to officers and staff with hearing loss, and created a support network with my colleagues that I co-chair with. Yeah.
Well, we will take a break, because this will be the episode number 1 that we speak with Andrea. But we will hear more about how this affected her future from 2013 and until today. So keep up and look for episode number 2 that will also be on the Policing TV, and you look for IPA Insight, #She'sIPA. Thank you for listening. Episode 1 ending here.